What's up, Degenerate Nation? Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast. This is the weekend college basketball betting preview. I'm Stuckey. Joining me, as always, my fellow BBOC co-hosts, Mike Calabrese and Greg Waddel. This is the last weekend preview before March. Next week's episode, we will be talking about Saturday, March 1st. The madness is right around the corner. Conference tournaments, and then, of course, the big dance will be here before we know it, but hopefully we can find a number of winners before then. Just to give everyone a heads up, I am under the weather if I sound different, but I'll be able to march on. These guys will carry me if need be, but it's good. It's a good time to get sick. I usually get sick like once a year. My body's just run down, but don't let me get sick during March. So I'm glad to get it out of the way. I was sick one time in my life on the first weekend, and I was awful. You wait all year for that weekend, and I was sick. Although it's like you just sit on the couch for 14 hours every day regardless. But so, gentlemen, how goes it? Let's, as we always do, if you're new to the show, we'll recap some good and some bad from the week that was. We will talk with Tanner McGrath to get his America East Minute to preview some America East games this weekend. And we will add a feature to the portfolio, and then we'll talk some weekend spots that we had circled. But let's start with the good. We do have an outline for the show, and I can tell you, because I've been sick, I didn't even look at it to see what you guys have down for your good, bad, and spot. So I'm excited to hear for the first time what you got. So, Greg, I'll start with you. What do you got for the good?
First of all, Stuck, you're pulling the classic coach move where you want your team to get a stinker performance out before March so you can feel good when it matters most. That's a veteran move by you. I applaud you.
Illinois is trying to do that every game. So
every single game off right now, and it's not working.
Get them all out of the way.
Speaking of Brad Underwood, my good. I want to show some love to 3 Big Ten programs. You know, this is my my league of choice here in the Midwest. And my vote for National Coach of the Year this year is Greg Gard. If I had a vote, I'd be screaming this to people. I hope he actually gets votes, because the deal that he was dealt, or the hand that he was dealt in the offseason, was arguably rougher than any other high major serious program had, I think. I mean, he had A.J. Storr playing really great basketball for stretches last year. Chucky Hepburn never really panned out the way they wanted, but both those guys were just ripped from him. And the entire reason, public-facing reason, was, we can't pay them that much money. I told them to go. He held a press conference literally begging Wisconsin fans to get off his back because he encouraged these guys to go make money while they can. And A.J. Storr, we never heard from him again. Bill Self still has him locked in a box. And Chucky Hepburn's had a great season, credit to him. But to just respond from that to being picked 14th, 15th preseason in this Big Ten with 18 teams in it, and rip John Tanji away at the last minute from New Mexico, which, by the way, can you imagine if Tanji was on New Mexico with Donovan Dent this year? It'd be a whole different situation.
And Toppin
potentially too, an all-time what-if team. But good Lord, I'm so impressed. This team, analytically, they are the best team in the conference. They have been for 2 months, and I feel like public perception has finally caught up to it with wins at Purdue and Illinois back-to-back. This offense is unguardable. They shoot it well from 3. They are literally the NCAA's all-time best free throw percentage team, and if they just shoot it well for the final month, they're going to set that record. It's impeccable watching Tanji and Blackwell just operate. And to piggyback off of that, I want to shout out a huge game Friday night in the Big Ten, Michigan State, 2 teams that have been down for 4 years. The Juwan Howard era obviously fizzled out, but Izzo has been, the worst 4-year stretch of his career. These 2 teams, a game up from Wisconsin in the loss column right now, really deciding the Big Ten race on Friday night in Ann Arbor. And, it's been a fun couple years with Zach Edey with Purdue. Brad Underwood's had some good teams, but the big dogs, I think, are back on top, and it's a credit to them.
Yeah, I thought about putting some. I mean, I talked about Wisconsin earlier this week about just the hire of Penny and Gard's willingness to change the offense, and that their changes on offense to a more modern spread is paid off in spades, and their offense has been incredible all year. I think that their offense has the highest ceiling in the tournament. Maybe their defense eventually holds them back, but offense, you cannot doubt they can score, and they can do it in a multitude of ways. So I completely agree with you. I was thinking about playing Wisconsin plus 500-600 to win the Big Ten as my future, but Michigan and Michigan State play each other twice down the stretch. Michigan's probably overdue to lose a close game or two, but the problem is Wisconsin lost to Michigan, and they only play once, and those bets pay out on if they're tied in the standings. Those bets pay out on who gets the 1 seed. So Wisconsin would have to jump Michigan entirely to get the 1 seed, which I don't think is worth it for 5-1. But before, I guess since we're on that game, Greg, I think I saw Michigan 3.5 point favorite. Is this? Yep. Do I just play Michigan State plus 3.5 and Michigan money line because they win every game by 2?
Yeah, I mean, might as well. I don't think it's a bad bet. I lean Michigan State pretty heavily, largely for spot reasons. As you mentioned, Michigan's just close game luck, for lack of a better term, has been insane. And
May does deserve some credit for that.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been some luck, but what he draws up at the end, and then when you have Golden and Wolf, and you can either use them or use them as a decoy, and what he's drawn up out of timeouts at the end of games is definitely a thing. But yeah, I mean, they've also had teams miss some shots, but it seems like every game they win by 2-3.
I would argue this too. The biggest contender moment spot for Michigan this year was Purdue Friday night in Mackey, and they just got blitzed. And Dusty said after, hey, I had no idea what this felt like. And I think there's an element of that, even though they are at home where they've been unbeaten this year. This is Tom Izzo with a banner on the line in year 30. Versus Dusty May being welcomed into this rivalry in the biggest spot it's seen in a decade. It wouldn't surprise me at all. I think they'll split, but I think Michigan State gets this first game in Ann Arbor.
Yeah, wouldn't surprise me in the least. It should be a close game. Can't wait to watch that one. Yeah, and it's funny. If you look since January 1st, Michigan is 30th on Torvik, even though they're 10-2. Ohio State is 31st, even though they're 6-7. But pays to win close games. That's the name of the game. Calabrese, I'll go to you. What do you want to highlight as the good from the week that was?
Well, first, I finally caught up on the St. John's Rick Pitino documentary, and I got to hear the velvety pipes of our own Greg Waddel at the beginning of the very first episode, running down the transfer class coming in to Queens. And by the way, prophetic as it was, you basically said it was one of the best classes. All the pieces fit together. The upside was there. Look at you. I mean, you're a media star now. I think Vice Sports should have you on speed dial, but that was really cool to see that. But in terms of what I'm bringing to the table on the hardwood, you know that I'm Mr. Mid-Major, low major, if we're being honest. And I think this is a year where we could see some crazy things happen on the bubble because there's so many power programs that are incredibly lackluster that really need to avoid an early flameout in a conference tournament. And does that open the door for a conference like the Big West? We've talked about this, but I think all the pieces are aligning for UC Irvine and UC San Diego to both get in. Both are 22-4, both are 12-2 in conference play. They split during the regular season, winning on the opposing team's home floor. Irvine, I mean, they've basically been the class of the Big West for years. Since 2014, the Anteaters have won 7 regular season conference titles, and they upset K-State in the 2019 Big Dance. So the selection committee is going to be familiar with their work. They're not an unknown commodity. And Russell Turner, he's just one of the best low major coaches that, mainstream college basketball fans probably aren't familiar with. This guy, regardless of talent, it doesn't matter what his scheme just transcends his personnel when it comes to the defensive end. And once again, they have another top 10 defense in terms of defending shots inside the 3-point arc. It starts with Bent Luken, the 7'1", 270-pound German. He has been turning away shots and altering shots and making it so difficult to get to the rim. I still think they're going to need to win by, let's call it, a bucket, 2 possessions in the conference title game, because UC San Diego has that really impressive non-conference win at Utah State. If Utah State ends up winning the Mountain West Conference, that win looks even better. And I do want to bring up as well for the Tritons, beating Utah State, it wasn't just a fluky win where they knocked down 17 threes or, they won the turnover battle. They shot sub 30% from 3 in that game. They lost the turnover battle. They lost the offensive rebounding battle considerably. It was all on their defense. And when you look at what they have, I just want this team to make the tournament so bad because Tate Jones, their Kiwi point forward, is a stat sheet stuffer. He's 10th nationally in statistical output, according to Evan Mia. So he's someone that impacts the game. He can facilitate for teammates. He's incredible. McGee is a deadly three-point shooter on the perimeter. And Hayden Gray is one of those players who can go from a role player to kind of a March Madness darling because he leads the nation in steals. So I'm excited because I can kind of see on the horizon there's hope. This was a pipe dream 2 months ago, I think, when Tanner and I first mentioned it on a podcast. But now I think there's an opportunity for both of these teams to punch a ticket. And I'll get to my rant in a second about expansionism and making this a 96-team field. It's all about getting more teams like Indiana into the field. Screw that. I want more teams that are really fun and difficult to prepare for, and 2 teams out of the Big West fit that bill for me.
Yeah, I don't think Irvine has a shot of getting an at-large. UC San Diego outside shot if they run the table, and then losing like the conference title. Home loss to Seattle kind of hurts, but the road win at Utah State does help. They have a lot higher offensive upside than UC Irvine, but yeah, I want UC San Diego to get in. I'm playing them in the first. That's a team I'll play in the first round no matter what. -1 versus Auburn, I'm in. It doesn't matter. UC San Diego opens up a 1.5 point favorite against Auburn. I'm the only one in the world that would bet it. Kidding. But yeah, I did see that, Greg. Your appearance. Fortunately, they didn't have you do a Wisconsin documentary. I saw you getting flack for your Wisconsin takes, but that's for another day. Speaking of Coach of the Year, my good. I would be remiss if I didn't mention this team. Sometimes people on Missouri Twitter think I hate their team, but I just give Jim Root and the 3-man weave guy shit. That's all that is. So I have a Ricky Paulding jersey. I used to love Missouri.
Kareem Rush, baby. Those teams.
Kareem Rush. I love those teams. The Quinn Snyder teams. But, I mean, Dennis Gates. This is a team that went 0-18 in the SEC since January 1st. You want to know the top 5 teams? Kurt Dorvick, Houston, Duke, Auburn, Missouri, Florida, and then Wisconsin is 6th. I mean, what a turnaround. They have, 3 top 5 wins on the season? That offense is incredible. To go from this is the new world that we live in. For Missouri to go from 0-18 in the SEC to a top 10-ish team, and NC State went from the Final Four to it looks like they're going to miss the ACC tournament. Just the swings. This is what college basketball is. And in the bad, I'll just go into my bad. Has to be Kansas. They're just broken. Go out to Utah, get swept. This is a team that was preseason number 1, I believe. Not that that means anything. Weren't they preseason number 1?
That's correct.
Man, roster just doesn't work as it's currently constructed, and I can't see them making any noise. I know it's Bill Self, but yeah, bad weekend for Kansas, and I guess we'll save some Illinois talk because Illinois Duke. We'll probably talk about that later, but I mean, Illinois. Just another bad effort, another bad week. We'll see if they're not even a lock for the tournament anymore. I mean, they have a bunch of quad 1 wins, but like, who's on like UCLA is on the bubble of quad 1. Ohio State is on the bubble. Like, if those teams like drop a couple games, like they could lose a couple quad 1 wins too. I think they're going to make it, but definitely limping to the finish line here. Greg, where do you want to go for the bad?
Yeah, I actually had Kansas too, but I'm just going to put a conspiracy theory spin on this. I think it's time for Bill Self to leave Kansas. I think they need a change, and I know that's
just like a Calipari situation.
That's what I'm saying. So I don't know where he would go. That's an Arkansas level pivot. I haven't even thought of anywhere that makes sense. I am going to throw an insane one at you that has been sitting in my heart for about a month now. Could North Carolina snipe Bill Self for 4 or 5 years and literally pull the Roy Williams 2.0 away from Kansas? Like, it feels to me like they don't want to move away from Hubert this summer. But if Bill Self made it known that he wanted a different retirement home for 5 years, I bet you they would.
And if Carolina misses the tournament?
It's going to be dicey. I think that's close to 50-50 right now. Like it sounds like they're preparing to bring him back regardless of how this ends. But it's one of those ones where it felt like, Cal was seeking out a departure. Rightfully so. It would have ended one way or the other. Self is probably sneaky close to doing the same. Kansas fans have loudly soured on this guy, and rightfully so. But I would just keep an eye on that. Like, this is the Windhorse meme. If we get to April, end of April, and some things start moving, remember that I floated Bill Self to North Carolina.
I mean, that's what agents are for. He doesn't have to do anything. He doesn't have to talk to anybody. Like, his agent has to, keep as many irons in the fire as possible and start that little whisper campaign that maybe he's interested in, an offer kind of thing. So crazier things have happened. As soon as you said it, I think I'll speak for Stuck on this. We all started nodding our head. I could see it happening.
Yeah, I agree. Maybe I'm trying to think of other teams. Well, you're going to have the Indiana domino effect. Who goes to Indiana? Is there a vacancy there? What happens there? I'm trying to think of another. What if? I'm trying to think who would pay him, and who's the coach that's vulnerable.
Or like a UCLA?
Is Mick retires?
That's a huge buyout there, but he's.
What about Texas?
Yeah, that's a good one.
Did you see that?
I could.
If Texas just loses in the first round and they're like, we're done with Terry, that would be interesting. Self going to Texas. Anyway, yeah, I could see UNC. Seriously, especially if they don't make the tournament this year. Where's your do you got a bad Calabrese?
Yeah, the
expansion rant.
The expansionist crap. It's college football, it's college basketball, all of it. I've hated it from the jump. College football now, it's all about, we need to get 8, 10, 12 auto bids for the SEC, Big Ten. I'll put that aside for a moment. March Madness is perfect the way that it is. The only thing that I would change is that if you're an automatic qualifier, I don't believe that you should have to play in the play-in game in those 16 versus 16 games. But I can live with that. To expand it, to shoehorn in power programs that have losing records by many games in conference play, like the naked cash grab that is college sports. Like, I guess it's just no amount of money is enough money. And what they don't seem to understand that other sports now are banging their head up against, the NBA chief among them, man, why doesn't anybody want to watch our meaningless regular season or all-star games? Oh, I don't know, because you're just stacking more and more meaningless inventory. And to have an extra game on Monday or Sunday night or whatever it is, these playing games of teams that have no shot of winning the national championship, nor should they even be allowed to. Like, I still view this idea of, well, anybody can get hot and win the national championship. I don't think they should be allowed to. It's like shooting an 83 in the first round of the Masters. I don't care what you shoot on Sunday. You shot an 83 on Thursday. You're not getting the green jacket. That is it. I've just had enough of this idea that, well, it's the purest thing, you win and that's who the best team is. No, it's a sport that has crazy bounces and variance, and you should be rewarding the teams that do the most through the course of the season. So I'm furious, just like many college basketball fans. At least I'm not on an island by myself as I was with college football, being against the expansion of the playoff. College basketball, you could hear it when ESPN announced it on College Game Day. The crowd immediately, the lusty boos started pouring in. Hopefully, the groundswell of public support can, hold this off for at least any amount of time, even if it's one extra year, to keep their hands off the 68-team tournament. I'll consider it a success because we don't need it.
Yeah, I mean, it's inevitable. I think it's going to expand, whatever. I don't like it either. But the good thing, where I draw the line, 96 is ridiculous. I never want to get to 96. If it's just 8 more teams and we do a first 8 instead of a first 4, whatever. As long as we get Like we're gonna have some high major teams that get in that shouldn't, but as long as we do get a couple of the mid majors in, I can live with that. I mean, I'm against it. What am I gonna do? But 96 would be awful. I mean, think about the teams that would be in this year if we went to 96. So if we did like a first 8 instead of a first 4, that would be it for me. Greg, do you have any thoughts on what you?
It would never happen, but like the only positive spin I could put on this is if it somehow led to getting more mid majors in, I somehow wouldn't mind it as much. I just don't want the mediocre 11th place high major that's won 2 of 10 to end.
And those are the only power brokers at the table. Those are the only ones that are pushing for this in the first place. Like the school
like North Carolina, Oklahoma, and Georgia would all be in this,
right. It's like Bradley's probably not going to get in as an at-large bid, nor is their president even available to speak to this committee that's putting things together. Like that's what I think makes me so angry. And I will say, it seems crazy to go to 96. It was crazy, in my opinion, to go from 4 to 12 for college football, and they just jumped right past 6 and 8 because once the TV people start cutting up a bigger pie, there's no holding them back. So that's my fear. But as Stuckey pointed out, we have no control over this whatsoever, so we may as well just kind of like let it slide.
Yep. I mean, it's what's happening in sports. I mean, we're gonna eventually have like a 6. I don't know. We'll probably have like a 24. I don't know. I think we're headed to college footballs. We'll have like 72 team 4 power conference D1, and then a massive tournament. I would like it if there's like D1, D2. Like, and then and then there's relegation, and then you have games that are
relegation. My language, relegation would be incredible because all of a sudden those bottom games would become incredible,
and it keeps everyone engaged throughout the season. But I'll share my thoughts on that in the summer when we do college football stuff. Let's get to our futures portfolio, and we will add one here. Let's. You guys already know mine. It's Texas Tech, 8-1. I have them as a top 10 team. They qualify now. Offensive and defensive adjusted efficiency. Have a pro. I've already been over Texas Tech. You guys knew I was coming with that this week. So curious to see what you guys brought to the table. Greg, I'll start with you.
I spent all last week shitting on the Big 12, and I still stand by many of the statements I made in that conversation. However, there's a team I had in my preseason Final Four that I gave up on a month ago that I am buying back in on right now, and it is the BYU Cougars. This is a team that has all the upside needed to win 4 games in March, and you can get them 40-1 to make a Final Four run. Just for comparison's sake, Bart Torvik has this as a massive analytical outlier. He has BYU as the 20th best team in the country for the entire season. KenPom has BYU in the 30s. Most other sites agree with KenPom. So Bart's onto something here that he likes on BYU that nobody else has noted. They're 1 spot behind St. John's, 1 spot ahead of Michigan, 3 spots ahead of Texas A&M, all teams that we've talked about having serious March upside per Torvik. And they've changed in the last month from what they were at the beginning of the season. They wanted to be this one-and-done factory that Yegor Demon and Cannon Catchings were the 2 featured options. It took Kevin Young 3 months to realize it, but Cannon Catchings is not a playable basketball player. He gave them nothing defensively. He's a volume shooter that was shooting 29% from 3. He's gone entirely away from him in favor of winning basketball players, winning veterans like Mawat Mag, who was so important to some of the good Rutgers defenses we've seen in a couple of years. And it's worked. Yegor Demon is no longer this volume scoring superstar. He's facilitating for guys like Dawson Baker and shooters like Trevin Nell and Dallin Hall. I just see the vision with it. I totally agree that they're playing closer to a top 15 to 20 team in the sport. In the last month, per Torvik, they've been the 11th best team in the country. As I mentioned, they passed the NBA talent sniff that you always want for teams to make a run in March. And I think they're extremely undervalued at 40-1 to win 4 games in the NCAA tournament. I'd love to add that to my board.
They have the offensive talent. For a price like that, you also like the 3-point variance nature. of the team, like they're 40-1 is more of a longer shot. So they're going to shoot a ton of threes if they get hot, and they're going to give up a ton of threes. So like they're a very compact defense. So that if they get to like an Elite 8, a Sweet 16 against an elite team, that I think that works in their favor. You have that price in your back pocket. My concern is, I mean, since you were talking about since January 1st, because if you look on Torvik, if you go and you filter home, so teams playing in just their home venues, BYU 6th in the country.
Yeah,
they've been dominant at home. It's just like a Mountain West thing, right? With the altitude and that home crowd. If you filter for away and neutral games, they're 50th.
Yeah,
that's what concerns me. Is like they went to overtime on a neutral against Mississippi, but they lost. They got crushed at Providence. I know this is early in the season, but since January 1st, they lost at Houston. They lost at TCU. They lost at Utah. Their road wins are Colorado, UCF, who's now a corpse, and West Virginia. Like West Virginia is their only good win on the season away from home. That's the only thing that concerns me about BYU. Fair or unfair?
It's totally fair. It's the one big black mark that I had in trying to present this. And the only pivot I have is we're going to learn if it really is a new version of this team or not in the final 5 games, because they have some of those opportunities. If they get that win against Arizona or Iowa State on the road, I think we feel different about it. And again, at 40-1, it's worth just a buy in and see if we're right, see if we're wrong.
Yeah. It's a different discussion at that price. But get Calabrese.
I'm going to put a slightly different angle on this because I like the way they're playing. I like everything that you brought up in terms of how they changed their rotation. I like the price. But my problem is looking at bracket matrix. They're on the 10 line right now. If they keep playing better, they'll get to an 8 or 9, which means they could catch a 1 in the second round. It's almost like I want them to go 2 and 3 down the stretch, slide to an 11, then get them at like a 50-1 to make the Final Four, where that road to go through the 6 and the 3 and the 2 makes a lot. It's an easier road to hoe, so to speak. So I just look at their potential path. If they continue to win, it almost hurts them, which isn't their own fault. So, they're playing their best basketball at the right time and all that. But I don't see them being able to play their way to a 7 unless they win out and probably make the semis or the title game in the Big 12. So that's my only issue with pulling the trigger right now. But all the fundamentals of the bet seem pretty strong to me.
Yeah, I mean, because I think that they're probably headed. That is a good point. Is that they're headed to like an 8 or 9? It's probably what they're going to end up being. So you do lose the 1 seed's not losing this year. I mean, I say that it could happen, but that you lose the opportunity of the 1 getting knocked off before you have to face them if you're that 8 or 9. But if they go out west, who do they have? Who was the 1 out west that they had? Like they had Auburn down south, Duke in the east. What was the? I mean, this is all going to change. But who would they send out west as the 1?
I mean, they could send Houston out west.
Florida.
Yeah, they had Florida out
Florida
west.
or Bama. If they're the second team, they're not, obviously there's not 2 slots in the South, and that's going to Auburn. So
if they got the West with Bama, I wouldn't hate that.
They could beat Bama. The game would be like 94-91.
Yeah.
And it would just be who's making their threes. So yeah, but that is a good point. If you would, I would rather them have them be at the 7 or 10 this year. But don't hate it. I like the case. Calabrese, what do you got?
Another Final Four pick here. The Johnnies almost at 8-1 to make it. Since 2012, only 2 teams have made the Final Four shooting less than 33% from 3-point range. Both were coached by Rick Pitino. Shout out to the Field of 68 for tweeting that one. I mean, we know what they are. We know what they're not. They're second in Ken Pom D, third if you look at Mia or Torvik. Synergy, when you look at situational, basketball, they are absolutely elite in terms of out of bounds, defending it on the baseline, under their basket, on the sideline, late in the shot clock. They're also elite. Their half-court defense is elite. We know what they want to do. We know that the coaching staff is absolutely in the weeds and is tailor-made for what they need to be able to defend in March. Different teams, round to round. And he's done this over and over again. Slick Rick has been to 7 Final Fours. So I have a coach that I know can get the best out of his players. The question is, if they were to win 4 games and get there, I figure one of those 4 games, Richmond's jumper actually falls. Let's say they make 10 3-pointers, they win by 20. The other 3 are going to be sweaty as hell. That's just the way the St. John's is going to play basketball against, elite teams or at least difficult competition. But I think at this point, with everything that they've proven throughout the season, throughout this gauntlet, and by the way, watching that documentary, I was on the wrong side of that Baylor game. I didn't even realize that Baylor didn't get the shot off. I just turned the TV off. If they had just reviewed it, St. John's wins that game outside the U.S. because the ball's still in his hand with all zeros on the clock. So all that being said, I think at close to 8-1, it's still a value on a St. John's team because anyone outside of the top, let's call it 5 or 6 teams in the country, I'm looking for, do you bring something special, elite to the table? Is it pace? Is it 3-point shooting? Is it a rim protector that's going to get 5 or 6 blocks in a single game? Or can you do it defensively and also switch up? They play a ton of man. They don't play very much zone. But in terms of the pressure and the way that they funnel the ball to certain shooters and they're strategic in that way, I just trust this coaching staff to get the best out of these kids. So all that being said, it's still roulette with, I don't want to land in the Auburn region. I don't want to land in the Duke region, but I think they have the goods to grind out wins in March. And in a lot of cases, that's what it takes. It's either 3-point variance or grind out some wins on the defensive end. I like the Johnnies at close to 8-1.
It is pretty crazy that St. John's has 4 losses on the year by a total of 7 points. Like, they easily could be undefeated this year. But that is the danger with St. John's, a team that's going to go through scoring droughts, is that you're probably going to be in a couple of sweaters in the tournament. But yeah, they definitely have an elite defense and a great coach and a style that is not going to be fun to play in a tournament setting. And yeah, I actually would like their draw if the way that it came out in the top 16 reveal. But we shall see. All right, so we have Texas Tech to make the Final Four. Greg hates the Big 12, so he went with BYU to make the Final Four. And Calabrese is going with St. John's to make the Final Four. So 1 for Texas Tech. Can't vote for your own. 2 for BYU. 3 for St. John's. We'll vote on 3, 2, 1. Texas Tech wins. All right, you guys let me get Texas Tech. I actually like both of yours. So the good news is, I think, we might lose Greg's if BYU goes down and beats Arizona. But they're going to be, I don't know, 7-8 point underdog in that game. But if they lose that game, might have a chance to get them again next week. And then St. John's, I mean, they're home against UConn on Sunday. So, and then they're at Butler. Probably could be.
And we get a week to see on the Lewis injury too. That was my one concern. I didn't get to it, but if he's full go, then I love it.
True. Yeah, so we might revisit both next week, but we'll add Texas Tech to make the Final Four to the portfolio, and good luck if you're joining us on any of those bets. But to recap all the ones that we have so far, I'll just ask you, like, we have our producer, yeah, he did put him in there. Let's see, Calabrese so far, we've only used one of yours, and it's Illinois, which, is it dead? I don't know. I don't know if they can put together 4 good games in a row. Have I seen weirder things? Sure. Like, think about the Carolina team that made a run. They have talent. They've dealt with so many, like Illinois, as bad as they've been, like up until like the last week, they still like passed all the analytics, the metrics tests. but they just can't. I mean, losing Johnson hurts. They've been sick. Everyone's sick all the time. What's his name? Even in this game, the game against Wisconsin, what's his name? Davis starts. He hits 2 threes. He goes to the locker room because he had diarrhea and he never got off the toilet. With this team is just there needs to be a document. There needs to be a documentary about this Illinois team.
You guys have seen the Sage incident, right? That's what turned all of this. Kylan Boswell, they were rolling. They were everyone's like Final Four pick, national title contender, 7th best odds, whatever. And Kylan Boswell pulled up to a home game where they were 10-point favorites and started sprinkling sage in the pregame. And photographers took pictures and were like, what is this? And they promptly lost to USC and their season fell off the rails. It's hilarious.
They can't even put the jersey up right. I mean, it's a mess. So I'm still holding out hope, but not a lot. We have Texas A&M Final Four. We got a really good price on that. They're going to be in wars, so just hope that Wade Taylor hits a couple game winners. And then the good thing is all these teams that I'm mentioning, like we have Iowa State, we have Maryland Final Four, now Texas Tech Final Four. We have Alabama and Iowa State national titles. The good thing with all these teams is the bracket could always just break right for them too. So we'll see. I don't mind our portfolio, but Illinois definitely is the one that scares me the most. The one that I'm just, you look at how that team's playing and definitely doesn't give you a lot of confidence. Yeah, any thoughts on what we have so far, what you're worried about or think is promising? Greg, I'll start with you.
I feel like we're pretty good. I think we kind of tried to nab either one of Bama or Iowa State as like the horse. And I feel like both have gone sideways. So, it's not necessarily the most fun to try and like buy Auburn or Duke at the best price. But the one thing I feel like we're missing is just the team that no brainers at least getting to the second weekend here. Hopefully that's Iowa State though.
Yeah. I mean, Iowa State has, since Mamachilevich was back, their offense has turned it around, which is good because their offense without him was definitely hit a skid. And Bama should have a high floor. But we shall see. We'll probably add one more next week. And then I think after that, we'll have conference tournaments and stuff like that. Maybe we'll add one more if we love it. But next week will definitely be the last ad. So if you have a horse or one that you really like, bring the good stuff next week. Now let's take a break and get to Tanner McGrath with his America East Minute.
Thanks, Stuck, and welcome back to the Am East Minute, hosted by yours truly. Standings as we enter the 7th week of America East Conference play. Bryan is 11-1, Maine and Vermont are 8-3, Albany, Binghamton, and New Hampshire all have 5 wins, Lowell and UMBC each have 4 wins, and then NJIT is a lowly 2-10. Big story this week for me is Vermont's resurgence. John Becker has righted the ship. Vermont is 6-2 in the past 8. They're on a 4-game winning streak. They have the best adjusted offensive and defensive efficiency marks in the league during February. They've totally fixed their rebounding and turnover issues, which haunted them in the non-con and is crucial for a Becker-led team which plays down-tempo, high-efficiency but low-volume basketball. You cannot lose the shot volume battle in those game scripts. Also, TJ Hurley is playing like an absolute superstar lately, averaging nearly 20 points per game as a potential first-team all-conference top scoring option. His shot creation and sharpshooting has been paramount for an offense searching for answers, and I just wouldn't be surprised if the Cats found their way back to the big dance with a inspired effort in the conference tournament. The other big story here is Lowell, who has been arguably the most disappointing team in maybe conference history relative to expectations. I mean, they are on a 3-game losing streak now, fresh off of 2 of the most absurd collapses I've ever seen last week. They blew a 6-point lead with 70 seconds left in overtime against Albany, where they allowed an 8-0 run to end the game by missing 3 front ends and turning it over twice in the final minute. And then they blew a 15-point lead with under 8 minutes left against New Hampshire by allowing Sammy Pieces to go nuclear and beat them on a buzzer-beating step-back 3. The effort and execution from the Riverhawks this year has been inexplicably bad. Those 2 face off on Saturday at 3:30 p.m. in Burlington, and I can't bet any Vermont hoops until I get more news on the status of their point guard, Shamir Bogues. He hurt his hip against Maine last Saturday. I'm recording this before Vermont's massive Thursday night tilt against Bryant, where apparently Bogues is playing, but not at 100%, and I just need to see how he's looking, feeling, doing before betting any Catamount hoop in the future. Other Saturday spots include NJIT heads to UMBC at noon on Saturday. Projected line is Retrievers -9, 147-point total. This is my best bet for Saturday. I'll be on the Retrievers, probably anything 10 or better. Their 4-out rim attack and kick offense can really rip when it's humming. And like in the first matchup with NJIT, they shot 24 for 30 at the rim, 80%, and a 23-point road win. And, NJIT also fouls like crazy. The Retrievers got to the line 22 times in that matchup. NJIT can't defend in transition, which is crucial against the up-tempo Retrievers. They pushed off 48 rebounds or turnovers in the first head-to-head matchup and scored 58 points. Good for 1.2 points per possession. And I feel like this is a great spot for the offense to really get it done at home against the league's worst team after tough road games against Bryant and Lowell this past week. The key to this matchup, though, is on the other end of the court. UMBC has shifted to a more zone-heavy coverage scheme since the first matchup, and NJIT is not built to beat zone. They are a horrific zone offense. They're too reliant on guard-centric dribble creation and have no real playmaking big men to work through as a high-post pin. And if Jim Ferry decides to break out the press, NJIT is literally the nation's worst press offense by points per possession, 0.65. Ultimately, UMBC loses because it loses the shot volume battle. They're vulnerable against bigger teams that can crush them on the glass or teams that can beat them in the turnover battle. NJIT is not either of those things. I think the Retrievers smoked the Highlanders on Saturday. The last two games we're going to look into, Maine heads to Binghamton, 2 p.m. on Saturday. Black Bears -4, 134-point total. It's Maine or nothing here. I mean, on the surface, this is a really bad matchup for Binghamton. The Bearcats don't have a point guard, so they're turning it over en masse and allowing opponents to run on them constantly. And that's a death sentence against Tynes and Clayton, who snatch every loose ball and turn them into runouts. Plus, Maine doesn't foul, which means Binghamton can't live at the line. And I don't trust Binghamton's zone offense, which produced 0.55 points per possession against Markwood's 2-3 zone in the first meeting across about 25 possessions. But Maine won that first meeting at home by 11, but needed to shoot over 50% from 3 to get there. And they're starting to see some serious shooting regression. And I think Binghamton's dribble defense has improved a lot since the first meeting, which will be key against Maine's ball screen motion. So I will likely pass here. Finally, New Hampshire heads to Albany, 7 p.m. Eastern for the AM East nightcap. Line is going to be probably Danes -10, 144 points. And I got nothing here. I can't get a read on New Hampshire. I clearly owe Nathan Davis an apology. How this team is 5-7 in league play is impossible to fathom, but their games seem to all come down to whether Sammy Pieces decides to start hitting everything. I'll pass here, but to conclude, my best bet for this week is going to be UMBC -9, and I was looking towards Maine -4. Otherwise, thanks guys, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks, Tanner. Let's get to some weekend rapid fire bets. All right, Greg, I'll start with you. Here's one I like too. I agree with you. I was going to bring is Texas A&M at home against Tennessee. You like the Aggies here?
I do. Yeah, I can be pretty short and sweet on this one, honestly. I like the spot for Texas A&M, fresh off of the embarrassing loss to Mississippi State, where they just, that was one of the rare times you see that team just feel like they don't have anything. Because normally a team that's so not reliant on making shots, it's just like effort plays. They didn't have it for whatever reason. That's not going to happen twice in a row. You've got to bring your A game against a team as physical as Tennessee, but kind of quietly, Tennessee, not a good rebounding team. They're fine there. I think the biggest thing there is that Felix Akpar is just not a great rebounder individually, and he's a good rim protector, good shot blocker, but there are openings for really physical front courts to just relentlessly pound Tennessee on the glass this year in a way that you wouldn't recognize. Tennessee's been bad on the road straight up. They've lost 4 of 6 on the road this year, 0-3 on the road outright versus top 20 teams. So KenPom has A&M as a 2-point underdog here. I doubt that's happening, but if we get them even as a short favorite, I love A&M in the bounce back spot.
Yeah, hoping to get them just like at a pick. Is what I'm hoping for. I think that they can play their game in this one. They can dominate the offensive glass. Texas A&M's transition D is questionable at times, but Tennessee's not a team that's going to really run and take advantage of that. And how do you beat Texas A&M? Their aggressive defense, you have to shoot, you got to move the ball. I don't trust Tennessee to shoot on the road at all. And I know Texas A&M's not a great shooting team. They're better this year than they were last year. They're shooting 23% at home in SEC games from 3. Like they're going to make some eventually at home. So there's some potential regression there. It's not a team that has to make threes, but if it does, it's a nice bonus, and I think that they're overdue to make some at home. So yeah, I like the matchup here for Texas A&M, which can match Tennessee's physicality. That's like an advantage that Tennessee usually has in games, their physicality. Not going to be the case here. I think, as you mentioned, Texas A&M can dominate the glass and play its game here at home. And I just don't trust Tennessee's offense on the road fully. Calabrese, Iowa State, Houston is a big one on Saturday. You like the dog?
I like the clones. Anything 8 or better. I saw that Torvik had it at 10. I would love to get 10. You mentioned it with Momcilovic back in the lineup. Iowa State's offense is working again. They've won by 30, 12, 11, and 14 since his return. Torvik, since his return, have them rated as the 5th best team in the entire country, one slot ahead of the same Cougars team. The offense works. The spacing works. You'll get the perimeter shooting against Colorado, 10 for 21 from 3. Against Cincinnati, 7 for 18 from 3. They don't take a ton, but it obviously gives them a leg up when they're shooting north of 35% from there. They lead the country in kill shots, per Evan Mia. And Curtis Jones, critically, with Momcilovic back in the lineup, he gets to slide into that 6-man role where he's more naturally gifted, and it gives them more balance in terms of being able to fight off those lulls and have his points and productivity coming off the bench. This is also a team that's capable of hanging with Houston at the Fertitta Center. They won 2 of 3 against Houston last year. They lost by 8 and pushed on the road against the Cougars last season. And that Cougar team, I was talking to Greg before we hopped on the recording, I still think that Houston team last year was better than this one. I know that all of the advanced metrics, Ken Palm and everybody else, says this Cougar team is better. The eye test for me is not there. I still, in critical moments offensively, say, where is Shed, either to make a big shot, facilitate, or to strip somebody, get into a passing lane, and to make a big play. I still think they are missing that killer instinct. And when you see them on their home floor, that killer instinct missing is basically showing up as them not pulling away from teams that they're clearly better than. Texas Tech, they scored 72 points in regulation. They lose in OT. Against Oklahoma State, they only score 72 points on their home floor. Baylor, who's a lousy defense by Big 12 standards, 76. They're 2-6 against the spread on their home floor in their last 5, and that includes beating the stuffing out of Utah. Not impressed by that at all, and covering by a single point against Baylor. When you add in the fact that they play super slow, I don't want to be laying 10 points with this team. So I'll go ahead and take the Cyclones plus the points. I think they're going to flirt with the upset. I think now that Momcilovic is back, these teams are almost mirror images in terms of upside. So I'll go with the Clones and the points.
Yeah, the only thing I worry about here is just the turnovers. That's the one thing that worries me with Iowa State. Is they've been turning it over a bit too often lately, and that's not great against Houston, and Houston's not going to turn it over. So from just like a shot volume perspective, that might swing in Houston's favor. And maybe the Cougars have had this game circled. Iowa State beat the living shit out of them in the Big 12 tournament last year. We'll see if that has any effect here. But getting Iowa State at close to double digits would definitely be
I'll say one
intriguing.
more thing, an interesting stat that I saw on Twitter. Iowa State has generated 16 runs, or I should say droughts, for their opponents where the teams they're playing have not scored for 4+ minutes. That's one of the best marks, I think, top 15 in the whole country. So if this becomes a rock fight, I clearly want to have the points in hand.
I just saw a market go up here. Men's National Championship, Duke and Auburn versus the field. The field is -180. Duke and Auburn are +140. Last I checked, UC San Diego's in the field. Give me the field. Greg, what do you got? What else you got?
All right, I want to jump in and fade Illinois while we still can. I want nothing to do with this team anymore. First of all, they're sick, as we discussed. But more importantly, I don't think they know how sick they are. Like you said, they started Jake Davis. You don't start that guy when you're shorthanded unless you think he's available and healthy. And he left in the middle of the game, played 8 minutes, and ran to the locker room. Tomovicic, who came off the bench for them, their center, he reportedly didn't travel with the team and drove himself to the game. He still played 21 minutes. It's a mess right now. And by the way, they were supposed to have been sick a month ago. So this is not like, they were sick for a game. No, they've been sick for a month and a half. Tomovicic missed games with mono, has played 6 straight games, and is still sick, and other players are dropping like flies. Even if they're healthy, they are significantly worse than Duke everywhere. But Illinois' quote-unquote strengths map horribly to Duke allowing them to play to their strengths. Like, Illinois lives on the boards. You're not out rebounding Duke. their only good redeeming quality of their offense has been scoring inside, which they don't even want to do. And Duke takes that away. You're not getting to the free throw line against Duke. They never foul. So I just don't see how this team shorthanded scores, number one. But number two, guards Cooper Flagg. I mean, they basically moved Trey White completely out of the rotation in the last month. And he's the only wing with size that they've got. I think you're going to see quite a few times in this game that Benham Rickhouse ends up on Flagg. It's going to be one of the biggest individual mismatches I've seen. So it's a big number, big spot, Madison Square Garden. I think Duke smokes them.
I might be stubborn and buy low in Illinois. I don't know. I got to find out that they're like healthy, which I don't think I might not be able to. I do think that the best way to play Duke is with drop, and they don't have a 5 that'll shoot, which has been killing Illinois, which helps a little bit. But you're right. I mean, who's the matchup for Flagg? Probably nobody. Duke doesn't turn you over, but the thing is, KJ just turns himself over. Like, that's what he needs to cut out. He's like 6 brain dead turnovers a game. So, yeah, I mean, Illinois is going to have to finally make shots for once. But they've definitely been running bad. They've been running bad in every department, from threes on offense, threes on defense, sicknesses, diarrhea, injuries, sage, jerseys. I mean, when does it end? Where is the bottom? You might be right. Just keep fading this team. Or maybe this is the bottom. I don't know. Let me see. Let's look since January 15th. I mean, Illinois is, I guess we can do it over the last month. Make it yeah, I mean, they're shooting sub 30% from three, which is like, I mean, is this who they are? And teams are shooting like 37, 38% from three against them. I don't know. Their 2-point offense, their 2-point D has been great. This team is so bizarre. So bizarre. Which means something crazy is going to happen with them in the tournament. Or maybe it's the NIT. Calabrese, what do you got?
All right, I will go to the Big Sky, which this is a public service announcement. The Big Sky's tournament this year is Starch Madness because it's going to be held in Boise, Idaho. So shout out to their marketing team getting some inspiration from Arch Madness for the Missouri Valley in St. Louis. Eastern Washington traveling to Northern Arizona. I like the Lumberjacks laying up to 4 in this spot. Why is this game important for Northern Arizona? Well, if they want to be able to get a bye into the quarters of Starch Madness, it goes to the top 6 teams. Right now, teams 5 through 7 in the Big Sky are 6-7. Northern Arizona is 6-8. They're on the outside looking in, but they get to face 3 of those teams at 6-7 in their next 4 games. So they're going to be laser focused in. And they beat this Eastern Washington team at their place in Cheney by 9. And keep in mind, Carson Tout, their rebounding machine, he was in foul trouble the entire game. He fouled out. He had 6 turnovers, his worst game in Big Sky play. Even with Tout in constant foul trouble, they still creamed them on the offensive glass. They had 15 rips there, and that was the difference in the game. It's going to be the difference here. Eastern cannot rebound to save their life. They have a below-average half-court defense, and when you look at what they've done to pull out of their nosedive, all of their wins have come against teams at the very bottom of the conference. Weber State, Sac State, Idaho. Those teams combined in Big Sky play 11-28. So while it's impressive that they pulled themselves off the mat, I think the fact that they have a better conference record is just reflective of who they played and when they played them. And their one good win in that entire stretch, since really mid-December, came against Portland State at home. And that's because the Vikings shot 9 for 18 from the foul line. So I think you're getting the much better team. I think the line here may indicate, you should go with Eastern based on the momentum. I'm going in the opposite direction. I think Trent McLaughlin has a huge game. He's been a much steadier scorer at home. I think he goes for 20+, and this is the beginning of a 3-game homestand. It's actually been kind of a weird schedule. So many road games for Northern Arizona in the past month. I think they get right here down the stretch, and you're going to be able to see their talent rise to the top. In this one, they win by double digits.
Going a bit off the radar there. Love it. I mean, it's probably spot of the day. We'll see what the spot tax is, but Arkansas hosting Missouri. Tournament lives at stake. Missouri coming off that huge win. Arkansas is playing much better since they lost Bland, who was shooting 27% in SEC play. We'll see where the line's at. but that's one I'm monitoring. SMU, we'll see if they're healthy against Clemson. Man, what a weird team, SMU. I think this is basically a tournament game against Clemson. They lose, they're not getting in. If they win, they just got to avoid a bad loss down the stretch because they need a quad one win. I mean, this team, if you look at like just their pure metrics, they should be in. Like their net, their resume metrics, like a power conference team with those always gets in. But they have 0 quad one wins and 0 wins versus the at-large field right now. And I mean, like they've gone 0 for 4 with shots against teams that are in the field right now. Clemson, they got to have this game. But I don't know if Boopy's going to play. We'll see. I think they need him this weekend. He was game time decision, so I think he'll play. Troy did come back. I think that they can, like SMU, what they want to just live on the offensive glass, which you can do against Clemson. They're pretty good in the mid-range, which you need to be against Clemson. They're not going to let Clemson operate in the post, very compact defense. They have been getting a bit lucky from 3 on defense, and Clemson can shoot. That is my one concern. But Clemson might be a little fat and happy here going down the stretch. They just have such an easy ACC schedule remaining. They're already in. It's like, I don't know. I think it might be a good spot for SMU, but I'll see how healthy they are. And another big one, we have Gonzaga against St. Mary's. Gonzaga is another weird team. Like they're not even a lock to get, like they're metrics darlings. Definitely not a lock to get in the tournament at this point. They get this game, I think they will be. But you like the Zags getting revenge here, Calabrese?
I do. I like them laying up to 5 in this game. I mean, they could have easily beat the Gales in Moraga despite shooting.
Yeah, they missed every shot.
3 for 17 from 3-point range. And the fact of the matter is it was tied, 58-58 with a minute to go. And look how they finished that game. They send Wessels to the line. He makes both. Then Ike gets rejected at the rim. Nebhard misses a 3. Ike misses a 3. That's it. Then, St. Mary's tacks on meaningless foul shots with under a second to go to win by 4. But I still look at this as the perfect spot to buy low on Coach Few, who he's historically been solid in those end-of-game scenarios. Not this year. Let's see if they can turn it around. I think if it does get to be a close game late, let's see if they've learned some lessons there. Because at the end of the day, zooming out on this program, they've made 9 straight Sweet 16s. Eventually, you think some of that winning DNA is going to, rise to the top here. And really, also, since that loss to St. Mary's, this team, offensively at least, has been on the warpath. They won 5 straight. They're 9th in KenPom since that loss to St. Mary's. Even in the loss against St. Mary's, Ike, 24-8. He had a great game against San Francisco and Wazoo, at least on the glass. If we can get anything out of Battle or Hickman, then I just think this is going to be a runaway. Because St. Mary's, they play with the exact same starting lineup the whole year. They're very consistent. I think, if the Zags want to go ahead and lose the game, they can lose it, and St. Mary's will play exactly B+, A- basketball. They're going to be on a line. But I think, GU's top gear in this game is just so much higher. And I think, Battle, at least it's been up and down, but he's shown he's been capable in conference play to go for 20+. So I'm going to go with this. I think an alternate line could be a play as well, because I think if they win, it's not just about getting off the mat. It's about making a statement at home. The kennel is going to be absolutely on fire. So I could see them winning this one going away.
Under probably is worth a look to, at least on the open. Bennett tries to just shrink these games against Gonzaga down to nothing. I guess Gonzaga is a lock to get in now that I'm looking. They're a 9 seed. Like you lose this one, then all of a sudden the room for error is gone. Like if you lose, they another
got
bad loss.
Santa Clara around the corner. They got there's teams that can beat them before they get to a title game in the WCC. So I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility if they lost. They'd certainly.
They're 10th in KenPom, which it's crazy.
I know, it's crazy.
But they just have lost every single close game against the quality opponent, and their best win came on the first day of the season against Baylor, who's not even been that impressive. Greg, you want to go back to your Big Ten and your trusted old Woody this weekend?
Yeah, I'm going to place the yuckiest bet in my portfolio's history here. I'm going to take Indiana. And look, rivalry games, weird. I don't think Indiana is that much less talented than Purdue. I don't think they've been at all this season. Obviously, there's been problems emotionally, mentally with all of this. The reality is this: since Woodson's firing was announced, while they're still letting him coach, this team has not dropped. This team has not bottomed out and quit on the season. This team has arguably played some of their best basketball of the season. They've covered 2 of 3 games since the firing against quality opponents. Most importantly, they've been seriously in all of these games to win them. They almost beat Michigan at home. They almost beat UCLA at home. And then they did beat Tom Izzo and Michigan State on Tom Izzo's all-time wins record ceremony night at the Breslin Center. So I'm just impressed by it. I think it passes the sniff test. Part of this is that Woodson has essentially done some I don't give a shit anymore things. Like he has put this team in a 2-3 zone defense that is incredibly lazy, but it's been effective against everybody they've employed it against. And Indiana, to me, they have always had issues trying to force certain guys on the court together with the 2 big lineups. Against Purdue, the first time in Mackey Arena, they led for 30 minutes and largely went away from Malik Renew. They've been consistent in doing that again since Woodson's quote-unquote firing. The assistant coaches have been pulling the substitution strings here, and they've really gone to small ball around one of the 2 bigs at all times. I think that bodes well. Most importantly, let's talk motivationally for Purdue. Spot-wise, people told you they would respond after the Michigan loss and beat Wisconsin at home. They got beat by 10. Spot-wise, after that, you were told they couldn't lose 3 in a row. Matt Painter doesn't do that. They lost by 9 to Michigan State. This Purdue team has very serious cracks that nobody wants to admit, even me. I know I've come on here a bunch saying how good Braden Smith is. The problem isn't Braden Smith related. It's not Trey Kaufman-Renn related. It's that everybody outside of their top 3, you throw Fletcher Lawyer in that bucket, would not be playing rotational minutes on any other serious competitive basketball team in the Big Ten Conference. So I think Indiana is going to hang in this game. I will not be surprised if Indiana wins this game, and I'm curious to see what the number is. I haven't seen one yet, but KenPom has it at 4. I think we may get even more than that, and I'm going to jump all over it.
Yeah, and Indiana's had it felt like 9 days in between games. I don't know if that's a good thing for Woody, but they've had a lot of extended rest here. And I think this is a tournament game for Indiana. They lose, I think they're out. If they win, I think they got a shot. That's how important it is to their season. If they lose. I mean, obviously they could make some noise in the Big Ten tournament, but I think if they win this game,
West Coast trip too. So it's like it would be so Indiana for them to win this game by 10 and then lose both to Washington and Oregon on the West Coast.
Yeah, but if they lose this game, I don't think they can get in that large without making a deep run. If they win it, I think they got a shot. So very important game for Indiana and a rivalry one at that. All right, that'll do it for us. Thanks to Greg and Mike for joining me as always. Thanks to Tanner. Thanks to our producer on the back end. Most importantly, thanks to all of you. Make sure you subscribe, tell a friend, tell an enemy. Leave 5-star review. Really help us out. Make sure you check out Edge Boost as well, our sponsor, who I really love and use myself. And I believe we will have a show coming up soon. We might start this Saturday. Keep an eye out on Twitter for that live show Saturday mornings, which we'll do throughout the rest of the season. It's time for me to go rest up, find some winners for this weekend. Follow along on the Action Network app. Thanks for tuning in. Good luck on all of your wagers this weekend. March will be here before we know it. Cheers.